The Big Picture, a Christian insight on the world of film, television and popular culture, with magazine editor Ben McEachern and scriptwriter Mark Hadley. 3D glasses on, amps to 11, screens to maximum. Get ready for The Big Picture.
Responsible for Pulp Fiction, the Kill Bill movies, and Django Unchained, Quentin Tarantino is arguably one of the few filmmakers who is a household name. His latest work, The Hateful Eight, is an R-rated movie. Now, we normally don't touch R-rated movies.
No, we don't.
We're not interested, frankly. But Tarantino is such a force on screen, his work is worth discussing. And particularly because people are just going to get along to see it, you should probably be aware of what's going on.
Loads of people are talking about this movie.
Yeah, of course. So we all get a better idea about where the screen culture is right now. Now, Tarantino revels in excessive, offensive violence, all sorts of stuff. He's also swings and roundabouts for big topics such as racism and justice and forgiveness. Does he land any punches this film round?
They call him the hangman. When the handbill says dead or alive, the rest of us just shoot you in the back, come up on top of a perch somewhere and bring you in dead over a saddle. But when John Roof, the hangman, catches you, you hang.
Get in, boys!
This here is Daisy Domergue. She's wanted dead or alive for murder. When that sun comes out, I'm taking this woman to hang.
Yeah, if you haven't seen The Hateful Eight and you didn't know what to expect from The Hateful Eight, I think that little clip gives a fair summary of what's going on in The Hateful Eight.
Yeah.
It is a Western. It's more than 3 hours long. Quentin Tarantino, as he really loves to do, he likes to throw in all kinds of film techniques and all sorts of things from film history, including on this occasion. Not only has he put together a Western, but he's given it an overture. There's an intermission in the film as well.
Those people who don't know, like an overture is a musical interlude you just listen to.
That's right. Even the fact we have to explain that would suggest that this is kind of film nerd history stuff that Quentin Tarantino has brought back to the big screen. This hasn't really been seen for since the 60s or the 70s. And even the choice of film that he used to film this on hasn't been used for like 50 years. So
they've actually had to re-equip cinemas to show it.
That's right. So all of that is going on with this event, and it is an experience seeing The Hateful Eight. Quentin Tarantino, whether you like his movies or not, I think it's undeniable that his movies are a movie experience. You know you are immersed in some kind of work of art that's in front of you. Now, how shocking and confronting that is to you, a lot of people would say, yes, it definitely is. Other people would want to go back for more, and that seems to be the appeal of Quentin Tarantino to the latter.
Well, let me jump right in and ask the question everybody wants to know. I mean, how offensive is it? It's rated R, and for extreme violence, I mean, how extreme is it?
Yeah, it is. If you've seen any of his other films, I actually found it a little bit restrained, if that's the right word for an R-rated film, and I know it probably isn't.
R for restrained.
We should briefly state for anyone who hasn't seen this, and I'd imagine a lot of our listeners haven't, and they're not going to. The Hateful Eight is about this posse of no-goods. It's set in America in just probably 10 years after the American Civil War, in this wintry wasteland. It's just this icy oasis, a little bit like The Revenant, not oasis, like just this wasteland full of snow. And this one all these no-goods turn up in this one kind of cottagey outhouse, like a shop in the middle of nowhere in the American wilds, and there's a bounty hunter. He's got his prisoner, and he doesn't know whether the men who are trapped in this house with him want to kill him or take his prisoner or what. You don't really know whose side anybody's on. There's a lot of deception going on.
There's a whole lot of, as I understand it, there are a whole lot of sources of hate strung between all of the characters. So it doesn't look like anybody trusts or likes
There definitely
anyone.
is. So where it gets increasingly less restrained, the violence escalates across the movie. The first half there's not that much, and then it turns up in the second. However, again, we just keep going back to, if you've seen Quentin Tarantino stuff before, you pretty know what you're in for. And at different points in this film, he tries to shock us with either vulgar scenes, really quite sexually explicit ones. There's loads of foul language in the film, and as we've already mentioned, there's a lot of violence in this. So yes, you will be offended if any of those things offend you as a film viewer.
Okay, now if there's any chance to actually redeem something from this, Tarantino does attempt to cover some of the big issues. Racism seems to be one of the big issues. How does he handle it here?
For a sophisticated and quite biting Western that I found this to be, like, as much as he's rebooting from the old, he's like kind of blowing its head off at the same time, and it's quite an exquisite work of art in many ways, The Hateful Eight, all these times, including what he tries to do. I think what he's trying to do with race, which is it's similar to Django Unchained, his previous film, which I didn't really like, and I thought also tried to take on race head on, but instead, because he tends to dive in so much into offense, he tries to basically shock us as a film viewer. He can often erode the points he's trying to make. That if he's trying to make a serious point, I think he ends up shooting himself in the foot, because it's hard to tell how serious he actually is. Django Unchained, I came out more insulted by its portrait of slavery. Hateful Eight, I wasn't as insulted, but he's trying to put the same thing up, a really serious issue of race, and he even claims that this movie is meant to somehow represent what's going on in America right now, that institutionalized racism continues to this day. So that's what he claims is in there.
Wow, you just don't. No, you
but
just
if you
don't
go
get
looking
that.
for that in the film, I kind of defy you to find it, because there is a lot of like racial anger and hatred, that was the word you used, and Hateful Eight, it shouldn't be surprising that it's there, but a lot of characters, black and white, are yelling all kinds of insults and slurs at each other, effectively claiming that the Civil War was divided along racial lines. And again, if he's trying to make a serious point about that, I'm not sure why he just has people insulting each other all the time. It doesn't really get to the dark heart of racism. Instead, it basically just taking pot shots at the surface. And Quentin Tarantino makes amazing pot shots. Like he writes really, really well. His dialogue is exquisite, but I don't think there's much under the surface. I was a bit disappointed in that, but there's something that jumped out at me about justice and forgiveness in Hateful Eight.
Now, there's a really interesting thing. Now, I've actually seen the film too. Got along to see that. After I finished The Fifth Wave, I needed something to cheer me up. And so I went along to the Hateful Eight, and there's this amazing prolonged scene, in fact, this appearance of Jesus in the film.
Yeah, it comes right at the start of the movie, and this is great for Christian reviewers. We get to talk about Jesus for a few minutes
without even trying to force it in.
And the opening shot of the Hateful Eight lingers for about 3 or 4 minutes on this stone statue of Jesus on the cross in this wintry wasteland. Now, I took it that it's meant to be something like a visual metaphor for what comes after, which is, as soon as a wagon goes past, which has got some of the Hateful Eight on, and then they're going past this statue of Jesus, I took it to mean that they're effectively entering territory beyond forgiveness. Because forgiveness is a constant thread throughout the film. A lot of characters talk about it. A lot of characters talk about how they're not going to give it. A lot of characters joke about whether they will give it, but they won't. And justice gets wrapped up in it as well. But to put Jesus Christ on the cross so front and center at the start of Hateful Eight.
And this is a really prolonged shot. This shot goes for minutes.
It left me thinking about what exactly are you trying to say. Now, I think Quentin Tarantino is trying to say that as humans, we don't forgive each other. Like, I think he's actually putting that message out there, and even by the end, the resolution of the film, which is a bloodfest. But there's a lot to be said there about how people hold grudges and don't offer forgiveness. In contrast, you go back to this statue of Jesus on the cross earlier in the film and be reminded of how this is constant call through God's word and through the teachings of Jesus about how we should look to forgive each other, and not just a couple of times, not just once a week, but loads and loads and loads. In contrast to what we see on screen in the Hateful Eight, and you see the bloody repercussions of lack of forgiveness. That's quite a powerful message there in the Hateful Eight, and left me thinking quite a lot about afterwards.
Well, The Hateful Eight stars Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. It's rated R for high-impact violence. Let's repeat that. The Hateful Eight is rated R, so extreme caution needs to be advised. It's now showing, well, all over the place. And in particular, if you'd actually like to read more about Ben's take on The Hateful Eight, have a look at this month's Eternity. So Ben's review of the Tarantino Bloodfest is hitting the pews this weekend in the February edition of Eternity. Well worth a look at.
The Big Picture is a Bible Society Australia production and part of Hope 1032's family of podcasts and vodcasts.